Hello and welcome to another episode of the Raising Musos podcast, where we talk everything about music education it's to support parents with their child's musical journey. My name is Eliza Bourgo, and today's podcast topic is the difference between playing and practicing. And I think it's very important to know the difference between the two, because you might find that your child's like playing their instrument a lot, but they might not be making progress, and that might be because they are not practicing, because they don't really know the difference. And you might think if they just play their instrument a lot, they are going to improve, but unless they are doing some focused practice, then they might just sort of stay at the same level, or they'll just progress a lot slower than if they did proper intentional practice. And so what I'm going to do in today's episode is really try to differentiate those two activities, practicing and playing, so that you can sort of figure out whether your child needs to do more of one or the other. Basically playing is very different to practicing. So hopefully by the end of today's episode, you will have a better understanding of what those differences are. And, playing your instrument is a whole lot of fun, and it's really enjoyable. Practice often probably feels a bit harder, and so it's very common for kids and students to just want to play and not really practice. But by the end of today's episode, I would like you to just reflect on your child's time at their instrument, and perhaps rethink how they do their practice and how they do their playing, basically. Okay, so first of all, what do we mean by playing an instrument? I mean, it sounds fairly straightforward, but for the just for the context of today's conversation, we're gonna just define playing as sitting down at your instrument and playing the pieces, playing through songs. Songs that your child would probably already know, songs that feel really safe and comfortable to them, and songs that they genuinely enjoy playing. And as a side note here, the reason they enjoy playing those songs is because they have mastered them. They've put in the practice beforehand. They've gotten to this point where playing the song feels quite easy, feels comfortable. They feel really confident playing it. And so then they just sort of play through it, and they really enjoy the process of playing. So you'll hear them play the song from beginning to end, maybe even a couple of times in a row. They will look really relaxed. They'll have fun. They might even come across as being in the flow, where they lose track of time, they lose track of the surroundings. They are just so into the song that they play, you can tell that they have a real enjoyment out of it. They might also just be improvising and noodling around, or just experimenting with different types of sounds. So that's more like a playful way of spending time at the instrument. So that's for today's discussion. That's what I mean by playing an instrument. I suppose the main takeaway here is that playing the instrument is something that will possibly feel quite easy, feel safe, brings a sense of accomplishment. It can bring your child in a state of flow if they're really enjoying it. So it's a pleasurable thing because of how familiar the song is that they're playing. And so, spending time playing a song is definitely not a bad thing. It's actually a really, really good thing because it's through that kind of playing time that students create a deeper connection, not just with the music that they play, but with the actual instrument as well. Another great advantage of just playing, your favorite songs at the instrument is that it builds the students' confidence in their ability to play. And because it is so enjoyable and pleasurable, it actually helps students to stay motivated and interested in learning more songs and learning harder songs. So playing an instrument, playing music, playing songs that we know is definitely not a bad thing. If your child is doing it out of their own will, it's a great thing because it's showing you that they do have some kind of relationship with their instrument and with music. The one thing you have to pay attention to is whether your child is only doing playing or whether they are also doing some practice. And practice, as I will explain in a moment, is quite different to playing. So now let me talk you through what practice actually is and how it's different to playing. So often practicing is really, if we narrow it down, it's really solving a problem with your playing. So there's a couple of steps. You have to first of all identify a problem. And so depending on the student's experience with music lessons, they might be able to figure out mistakes in their playing by themselves, or more likely the teacher would have pointed out something wrong in the piece that they're playing. And the thing that could be wrong could be, wrong notes, wrong timing, it's too slow, it's too fast, or the speed changes. Or it could also be something related to the technique, like their fingers or their hands are not moving the right way. They could be using wrong fingering. So the point is that practice begins by identifying an issue. And then practice is the process of addressing the issue so that it no longer exists. So instead of just playing through a song and enjoying it, we actually have to go, what is it that I didn't do very well and how can I fix it? So a practice session should be a lot more intentional, goal-oriented, and a lot more focused than a playing session. So I hope that makes sense. And so there's a couple of different strategies that students can use to address that problem that they or their teacher would have identified in their playing. So they could do things such as breaking things down. So if they're struggling with a big section, getting wrong notes everywhere, Can they break it down to focusing on one bar at a time? Maybe even one beat at a time. So breaking things down. And another one could be repeating. So using repetition, especially the tricky bits of the song. So again here, if you're just playing the song, you would sort of play through the hard part. If you make mistakes, you'll just keep going and ignore it. But in a practice session, you would actually just focus on that part that you keep getting wrong, figure it out, and then repeat it enough times so that you no longer make the mistake. So repetition is a big part of practice, and it's a strategy that's very commonly used because repetition really helps with mental, oral, and also muscle memory. Another practice strategy could be simply slowing down the tempo at which we play. So even if we know that a piece has to be played fast, we will intentionally play it a lot slower to ensure that we are doing things correctly. And eventually, often what happens, once we can play it correctly at a really slow tempo, then we would just gradually increase the speed at which we play the piece until it lines up with how fast it's supposed to be. During a practice session, students can also use techniques specific to their instrument. So, for example, pianists, harpists, we might just practice one hand first and then the other hand before we play it hands together, kind of thing. And of course, a huge part of practice is about listening. And again, if we are not listening actively, listening carefully to our playing, we won't hear the mistakes that we're making. And if we're not listening, we won't even be able to hear if we have fixed the issue that we identified at the start, right? So listening is a huge part of practice. So a student who is truly practicing will be engaged. They will identify issues with their playing and they will try different ways of improving their playing. Instead of just playing a song and then playing another song and then playing another song. So that's really the difference between playing and practicing. So now let me talk about, why it's important to make that distinction. So here's a little analogy for you. If you're learning to cook, you don't improve just by making the same dish over and over again. I mean, you will get good at making that one particular dish, but not like cooking in general. You get better by learning new techniques, correcting mistakes, and improving specific skills. So the same goes for music. So practicing, which remember is when we identify the problem and we're very intentional about fixing whatever it is that we've identified as wrong or just not as good as we would like it to be. So practice, it helps to build technical skill. Just the ability, your finger coordination, finger strength, anything like with technique, that comes through practice. Practice can also help improve musicality, because when you're practicing, you sort of have to become familiar with the piece through repeating it, and you can start thinking about the phrases, the expression, the dynamics. And practice also improves your efficiency. So when you are focused about fixing the things you're doing wrong, you'll progress a lot faster than if you just play the piece and ignore everything you've done wrong and never address those things. So intentional practice means you will progress faster. Okay, and so, well, you might be wondering, well, or maybe you've identified that your child is basically just playing all the time and never really practicing. So what can you do? What can you do to help your child get actual hardcore practice in? So, the first thing would be just asking them a couple of questions. A good one is basically, what are you working on today? So don't ask them what are they playing, but more like, what are you working on today? What are you trying to improve? How do you want this to sound like by the end of your practice? What has to be done differently? So ask them a question about some kind of progress or change in their playing that they have to achieve, as opposed to what are you playing? Because then they will likely just play through the piece and not even think about what they could do differently. If you see them struggling to practice, maybe their song is a little bit too long or they have trouble focusing, whatever it is, you can suggest to them working in small sections, and also encouraging them not to always play from the start. Playing from the beginning is something we do when we are playing, not when we are practicing. So if you know that your child always really struggles with 2 or 3 bars towards the end of the piece, they don't need to play from the beginning. They just need to play that. They just need to practice those couple of bars. So another great strategy, I should say, is use the 3 times perfect rule. So just repeating something correctly 3 times in a row before they move on. So obviously here we are using the strategy of repetition, which again is different to just playing the piece once all the way through. Okay, so they've identified a mistake that they keep making. They try to fix it. They fix it 1 time. They have to repeat it 2 more times before they can move on to something else. If they have to do even more repetition, then encourage them to repeat things in a mindful way. And if they start zoning out while repeating, then the repetitions might end up causing more harm than good. And you also have to be careful that when they are repeating things many times in a row, that they are not making the same mistake. And if they end up making mistakes during repetition, that probably means they need to slow it down. And again, you don't want them to repeat things so much that they lose focus, or even worse, they start developing bad habits that they didn't used to have. So repetition is great, but not too much at the same time. And another great tip for you is to encourage and celebrate progress, not necessarily achievement or completion. So instead of saying, did you practice for 30 minutes? Another great question you can ask instead is, what did you improve today? And so again, here we shift the mindset from just playing through without any intention to what is the progress that we've made? What is it that we've improved? What change has occurred in our playing as a result of our practice? So at the beginning of the practice session, you ask them, what is it you're going to work on? What is it you're going to improve? What is it you want to do differently? And at the end, you just ask them if they were able to achieve that. What changed in your playing? What did you work on? Were you successful? Da 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 da. Okay? And so just those little shifts in the way we approach our time at the instrument can really make a big difference. So as I said, playing, I love playing piano. Like playing an instrument is amazing. And so if your child is playing, like you don't have to stop them playing just so they can do their practice. You sort of just have to balance it, right? Because playing, as I said earlier, it helps develop confidence. It fosters that connection with the music and the instrument. It feels so rewarding and it feels relaxing, and it's just such it's an experience that feels really nice when we play for pleasure and enjoyment. So we have to basically be able to balance the practice with the playing. Because if we also only focus on practicing and on fixing our mistakes and improving our skills and never about just playing for pleasure, then you can see that music will never really feel like a pleasurable and an enjoyable hobby. So balance is key. And there's lots of different ways you can balance playing with practicing. You can balance it during the actual time at the instrument. Maybe you just start with the practice and you finish with just playing for fun, playing for enjoyment. Or maybe you just do it the other way around. Maybe you start just playing for enjoyment, so you just sort of feel in the zone, you feel inspired, and then you switch to doing some intentional practice, thinking about the mistakes that you've made and what are some ways you can fix those. Maybe you can balance the playing and the practice over different days in the week. So you have a day where you're just like playing and enjoying it, and then the next day is just practice, and the next day is playing. So there's definitely a lot of ways to do both activities, and they both matter. Okay, now for me, I would say I definitely do both playing and practice almost simultaneously. Because if I don't play, I actually don't know what I do wrong. So I mostly start by just playing a song that I'm working on, right? And then I'm like, oh, I didn't do that bit really well, like as well as I would have liked. So then I just switch into like practice mode, and I just try to like work on it by playing it slower, checking the notes, checking the fingering. And then after I'm done practicing, well, guess what? I'm going to go back to playing that piece to see if I can do that section that I worked on better than before. And if I don't, I have to go back and practice again. And then I practice some more, and then I go back to playing. And so eventually, probably the same will happen with your child. They'll just keep going back and forth between playing and practicing as they get better with their listening skills. So they'll be able to tell what they've done wrong, and then they'll be able to know what strategies to use to be able to improve their playing. So then they can play some more, etc., etc. Okay? So yeah, and sometimes also, sometimes I'm definitely just do playing, like I don't even bother like practicing, I just play through songs. So that might take me like 2 minutes. I just play my favorite song, and if I make mistakes, I don't care at all. I just play through it because I just need to, I just need to relax or something like that. or I just want to have fun on my instrument, I want to just make some nice music. So sometimes I just play and I don't even do any practice. And then other days I'm like, you know what, I'm going to learn a new piece. I'm going to learn a new section of my piece. And so I go straight into practicing, into learning notes, into playing with the metronome, and I don't really do any practice, any playing, sorry. So, you know, even me, like, I balance practice and playing in different ways depending on my mood and on how much time I have and on what my goal is and what I feel like, basically. I suppose I sort of have that luxury now where I can sort of choose how I do music in my life. But if you're learning music, or if your child is learning music, then this is definitely something that I would like you to think about. Is, first of all, is my child doing both playing and practice? Or are they doing too much of one and not enough of the other? So you want to balance those two activities, because again, they really complement each other and they are both so important to musical development. Phew, that was a lot of talking. I'm almost out of breath. But we are almost done here. So I'm gonna just conclude this episode. Understanding the difference between playing and practicing can make a huge impact on a child's progress. If your child is struggling to improve, despite spending a lot of time on the instrument, then you probably know they are not practicing enough. They're doing too much playing. And maybe if your child is practicing a lot and they don't seem to enjoy it, maybe they should just play it for fun a little bit more often. And find songs that they really like and just play for pleasure. Sort of balance the more tricky, challenging and hard thing that is practice. So I would love to hear from you. If you've learned an instrument before, like, how do you think you balanced playing and practice? Even if you're like, you know, a professional musician now, like, how much practice do you do in relation to how much playing do you do? Is it something that you just are aware of, or is it something that sort of just happens? And if you are a parent of a child learning music, what strategies have helped your child make their practice time more effective? So you can get in touch with me on Instagram. My handle is @musicmakersacademy. You can also send me an email. My address is hello@musicmakersacademy.com.au. If you're watching the video on YouTube, of course, you can always leave a comment below the video. So that's it for today. I hope this was an interesting episode. I think it's definitely something that not many people think about, the difference between playing and practicing. So I hope this will make a difference in your life, in your child's musical life, for the better. That is totally my intention. So let me know how it goes. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll speak to you in the next episode.